Let's talk about pedigrees of X-linked traits. So again, a pedigree is a diagram of a family tree that shows the inheritance of traits or disorders through several generations. And this time we're going to look specifically at traits that are located on the X chromosome. Humans have 46 chromosomes. They inherit one set of 23 chromosomes from mom and one set of 23 chromosomes from dad. And so what you see is that there are two chromosomes 1 and two chromosomes 2 and so on. One chromosome 1 being from mom and one coming from dad, one chromosome 2 coming from dad and one from mom. So the first 22 chromosomes are called autosomes, and they're exactly the same for mom and dad. So these ones here, they're exactly the same for mom and dad. These are called the autosomes. They are the non-sex chromosomes. But the last two chromosomes, the ones right here, they're called the sex chromosomes, and they are different between males and females, and they determine the sex of the offspring. There are two sex chromosomes in humans. There is the X chromosome and there is the Y chromosome. And genes that are located on the X and the Y chromosome are called sex-linked. The X chromosome is large and carries many genes, which you can see here. There is a long list of them. And those are called X-linked genes. And the Y chromosome is small and has relatively few genes, which you can see right here. So in genetics and in pedigrees, you will see X-linked inheritance patterns much more often than Y-linked inheritance patterns. So we'll practice X-linked inheritance patterns. So one example of an X-linked trait is red-green color blindness. On the X chromosome, there is a gene that codes for opsin. An opsin is a photopigment that allows you to see red color. So if you can make opsin, you have normal vision, and this is how the world would look. And if you have a mutation and you can't make opsin, you're red-green colorblind, and this is how the world would look. So let's figure out how a Punnett square would look for an X-linked trait, for this X-linked trait. So the first thing I have to remember is that males are XY, so they carry an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and females are XX. So for X-linked traits, you're always going to write the X down, and then as a superscript, you write your allele. So because opsin allows you to see red pigment, I'm going to choose R. And I'm going to call the capital R, which is the dominant one, the normal vision. And I'm going to call the lowercase r superscript colorblind, because you have a mutation in the opsin gene and you cannot see red pigment. Okay, so how does the Punnett square look? Okay, so we're going to draw our normal Punnett square, 4 boxes. And we're going to put the alleles from dad on top, and we're going to put the alleles from mom on the side. Okay, so far we have only put down the sex chromosomes, the X and the Y, and the X and the X. What about the alleles? Well, we can see right over here that dad is unaffected. Dad has normal vision, so we know that dad has a capital R. He has the dominant allele. We know right here from this box that mom is unaffected, but she is a carrier. So what that tells us is that since she can see color, or red-green color, she has a dominant allele on one X chromosome, and she has the recessive colorblind allele on the other one. So let's work out how the offspring would look. Well, there are 2 girls, and I'm going to again put the X's down first. And there are 2 boys, X, Y. Okay, so what about the alleles they carry? Well, here we go. So this girl right here, she gets a normal vision allele from dad and a normal vision allele from mom. So we're going to put those in, and her vision is normal vision. Her brother right next to her, he gets the Y from dad, and he gets a normal vision allele from mom, so he has normal vision. Her sister, right here, she gets a normal vision allele from dad, so she has normal vision because that's the dominant allele, and she gets the colorblind allele from mom. So she is a carrier. She has normal vision, but she carries one of the colorblind alleles. And how about her brother? Well, her brother gets the Y from dad, and he gets the colorblind allele from mom, so he is colorblind. So how about all the siblings then? What we can see is there's one boy and he is colorblind, and that's your affected son right here. There is one daughter and she is a carrier, so she's unaffected. She can see, she has normal vision, but she's a carrier. And then there is a daughter and a son, and both of them only carry the dominant allele. They are unaffected and they're not carriers. All right, so how would this look in a pedigree? Well, in the pedigree, you have the dad and the mom, and they have 4 kids. They have a son and a daughter and a son and a daughter. And we know that the second son is colorblind, so we'll color it in for affected, so he's colorblind. And so what's easier in a pedigree, this is how it would look most of the time. But what is easier in a pedigree is if you put in the carriers, and for X-linked traits, the carriers have a little dot in the middle. Instead of like the half circle, they have a little dot in the middle. That indicates carrier for an X-linked disorder. So how does an X-linked recessive trait look in a pedigree? Well, even if I was not told that this is an X-linked trait, I would suspect it fairly quickly. The reason being that the males in this pedigree are much more affected by the trait we're looking at than the females are. And the reason that is with X-linked traits is that men only have 1 X chromosome. So even recessive traits show up immediately. There isn't a second copy of a different allele, of a dominant allele, to cover it up. The second thing that I can tell here is that it has to be a recessive trait. And the reason it has to be a recessive trait is that I can see it skips generations. This generation doesn't have the trait. The second generation does, but this generation here does not have the trait. And then this generation does again. So whenever a trait skips generations, you know it's recessive. So where do you start? Well, you always start with what you know. And what you know is generally the affected individuals. We know now it's X-linked recessive. So the affected individuals, we can determine their genotype. So this boy here, of course, is XY, and he is, let's assume it's colorblind. He carries the allele for colorblindness, so I'll put the lowercase r here again. His brother is also XY, of course, and he has normal vision, so he carries the dominant allele. What we know here is that this boy here, he also, of course, is XY. He also is colorblind, so he has to carry the recessive allele for that. And the same holds true for this man right here. Okay, so we have worked that out. And from this, you can often work backwards. So what we know is that the dad here, of course, is XY and the mom is XX. And the dad has normal vision, so he has to carry the dominant allele. And the mom is normal vision, so she has to carry 1 dominant allele, but she passed on a recessive allele to her son who is colorblind. So we know that the second allele has to be the recessive one. So we know that she is a carrier, and we can put that in right away. She is a carrier for color blindness. She has normal vision, but she is a carrier. Okay, what else can we determine here? Well, we can tell that this boy here is XY, of course. He has normal vision, so he inherited a dominant allele from mom. And this girl here is XX, and she would have inherited the recessive allele from dad because that's the only X he can pass on, and she must have inherited a dominant allele from mom. So she also is a carrier for colorblindness. What can we tell about the mom? We can tell that the mom has to have at least 1 allele for normal vision. We cannot tell for certain whether the other allele is also for normal vision or whether the other allele is for color blindness. We can't tell. Okay. Let's work our way backwards. We know that this dad has normal vision right here, which means he has to carry the dominant allele for normal vision and the Y. And we know that the mom passed on to her son right here. She passed on the recessive allele for color blindness. So she has to have one allele for color blindness and one allele for normal vision because she has normal vision. So she also would be a carrier. We can figure this out. Okay. We don't know about this sister right here. We don't know. We know that she has one allele for normal vision. We know about the brother. So the brother, of course, is XY. He must have inherited the normal vision allele, which gives us the genotype of the parents. So the father, of course, is XY. Father has normal vision, so he's carrying the dominant allele. The mother is XX. She passed on the color blindness allele to one of her sons, so we know that one of the alleles has to be the recessive one, but she has normal vision, so the other one is the dominant one, and she also has to be a carrier. So there are two more daughters right here. So these parents, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. They had 1, 2, 3 daughters and 2 sons. And the one son is colorblind. The one daughter is a carrier. We can't tell with the other 2 daughters. What we do know is that they have normal vision. So what we do know is that they carry the dominant allele for sure on one of the X chromosomes, but whether they carry a second dominant allele or whether they are heterozygous and carry a dominant and a recessive allele, we can't tell. And the same holds true for the daughter right here. Now, this person right here, she married into the family. So we don't know either what her genotype is. What we do know, same as with the sisters, is that she has normal vision. So she has to carry one dominant allele, and the other one is either also dominant or she is heterozygous, dominant, and recessive. All right, what we do know is that she passes on to the sons both a dominant allele. So they have normal vision, they get the Y, of course, from dad, and the other brother also has normal vision, and they get the Y from dad. And then he marries, and they have 2 daughters, and both have normal vision. So that is pretty much everything figured out. No, there's one more that we can figure out for sure. This brother here, he has normal vision, so he must have a dominant allele and a Y. Okay, and the remaining females that we didn't figure out yet, we cannot tell whether they are homozygous or heterozygous dominant. With here we already talked about it. Most likely would be that they carry 2 dominant alleles for normal vision, all 3. That's most likely, but it's not certain. Okay, that's how you'd solve that.